And now your host for Rabbi's Rant, Rabbi Eric Walker.
Psychologists have been fond of stating in recent years that human happiness, or what psychologists call subjective well-being, is largely independent of our life circumstances. The wealthy aren't much happier than the middle class. Married people aren't much happier than single people. Healthy people aren't much happier than sick people, and so on. One might reasonably conclude, therefore, that changes in life circumstances would not have long-term effects on our happiness. This indeed has been the dominant model of subjective well-being. People adapt to major life events, both positive and negative, and our happiness pretty much stays constant throughout our lives, even if it's occasionally perturbed. Winning the lottery won't make you happier in the long run, goes the theory, and while a divorce or even a major illness will throw your life into upheaval for a while, your happiness level will eventually return to where it was at before, that is, its set point. Moses spent 40 days on the mountaintop with the Lord twice and 40 years in the wilderness. That's because life happens in the valley. The word says, I look to the hills from where my help comes. My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth, from Psalm 121. We read from the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. People reference their mountaintop experience with the Lord, and I'm so thankful that there is such a thing. It's exhilarating, both spiritually and physically. Have you ever been on top of a mountain? I thought I had been until I'd visited Mount Rigi in Switzerland. It started snowing, and there was something beautifully alien about the atmosphere. I felt tingly and accomplished, even though I only rode up in a train and there was no climbing involved. The view up there was breathtaking. Things are simple. There's no Starbucks up there, no car payments, no plugs to charge your phone. But you know what struck me very odd? It happened on the ride up. There were thick trees on either side of the train tracks, and then, at one point, very high up, there were no more trees. Like an imaginary line had been drawn where no trees were allowed to cross. Now, scientifically, I knew that this would happen, yet it caught me off guard anyways. The atmosphere no longer allowed for growth. Suddenly, things looked barren. I became increasingly aware that things were being stripped away, even basic things like trees. Don't get me wrong, the Mountaintop Experience was truly incredible and something I'd never forget. However, the mountaintop was not designed for living. It teaches and brings perspective. Then it's time to head back down to flatter lands. Do you know what you'll find in the valley as you return? You'll find trees and lush vegetation, food and shelter. You might be bombarded with chaos as soon as your feet step off the mountain, but you carry something precious with you, fresh perspective. Maybe you went to the top of the mountain because you were lost, and now you can find the road that leads you toward home. Maybe you were running away to find an escape because your problems seemed too big to conquer, and now you've seen just how small they really are in the grand scheme of things. Mountaintops are beautiful things, but valleys are where life happens. It's where choices are made. Mountaintops might hold the wedding ceremony or the birth of a child, but the valley is where your life takes place. It's where your child holds tightly to your neck and whispers, I love you so much after a tough day. Valleys are where you hear the voice of the Lord. There is no water on the mountaintop. The air is too thin to breathe. Life happens in the valley. In the book of Joel, chapter 3, verses 14 to 21, we see what else happens in the valley. Beginning in verse 14, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon will be darkened, and the stars no longer shine. The Lord will roll from Zion, and thunder from Jerusalem. The earth and the sky will tremble. But the Lord will be a refuge for his people, a stronghold for the people of Israel. Then you will know that I, the Lord your God, dwell in Zion, my holy hill. Jerusalem will be holy. Never again will foreigners invade her. In that day the mountains will drip new wine, and the hills will flow with milk. All the ravines of Judah will run with water. A fountain will flow out of the Lord's house and will water the valley of acacias. But Egypt will become desolate, Edom a desert waste, because of violence done to the people of Judah, in whose land they shed innocent blood. Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem through all generations. Their blood guilt, which I have not pardoned, I will pardon. Many evangelists have drawn from this passage to challenge audience to make a decision for Christ. Others view this valley of decision as a time of judgment when the Lord decides the fate of the nations. Which is it? An invitation or a prophecy of doom? The context of Joel 3 clarifies that this is a time when God judges the earth. Verse 2 says, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel. The valley of Jehoshaphat is the same as the valley of decision. Jehoshaphat means the Lord judges. The decision being made in the valley is God's, not the multitudes. The literal geographic location of this valley is likely the Kidron Valley on the east side of Jerusalem. The focus of Joel 3 is on the future day of the Lord. The time will include a gathering of the nations, a judgment on wickedness, and astronomical signs. Joel's prophecy of the Valley of Decision finds its counterpart in Jesus' Olivet discourse and the judgment of the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25:31 through 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on the throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Then he will say to those on the left, Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? He will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. We see that judgment comes in the valley, not on the mountaintop. Immediately following the prophecy of judgment, Joel transitions to a description of the Lord's millennial reign, a literal 1,000-year time period that follows the tribulation. During the millennium, Christ rules as king from Jerusalem. Some interpreters argue the millennium is figurative, yet many passages, including Joel 3:8-21, describe the time in great detail. Further, Revelation 21:6 refers to 1,000 years 3 times. It seems that God desires us to know that the millennial kingdom is a literal time period. Ultimately, the valley of decision in Joel 3:14 is not about humans choosing whether or not to follow Messiah. It is God handing down his decision of judgment at the end of the tribulation. Praise the Lord for his promise to make all things right one day and to be a refuge for his people from Joel 3:16. The Lord meets us in the valleys of our lives. He is a refuge in the valley. Our battles are fought in the valley, as we read from Exodus 17. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Our victory comes from the mountaintop, but our life and battles happen in the valley, where it is lush and green and water flows. God sustains us in the valley through trials and despair, through strife and through loss, and he meets each one of us right where we are. Several of our guests today will be sharing about their experiences in the valley and how God brought comfort to them in their time of despair. We share these stories with you that you might find hope, comfort in the way to feel, hear, see, and experience the Father's love. Each one of us is an overcomer by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. And that, my friends, is today's Rant. When we return, we will take your calls at 208-558-5100 or toll free 888-988-9673. We'll be right back.